Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We saw Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman present her fourth budget on the 1st of February. Now, this has been the second budget in a pandemic situation. The Amrit Kal budget, as it is being termed, a long-term vision, a policy-driven budget, a budget for the next 25 years. That's a unique way of positioning it. Response has been diverse. Industry bodies call it futuristic as a budget. The IMF is happy and the opposition is predictably calling it a damn squib. Joining me on The Nation Wants to Know today is the Finance Minister of India, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, to break down Budget 22. Ms. Sitharaman, it's a great pleasure to have you back on the Republic Media Network. Thank you so much for joining us and congratulations on presenting your fourth budget. Ms. Sitharaman, the IMF Managing Director said, and I quote, thank you, Ms. Sitharaman. The IMF Managing Director said, and I quote, I read the budget statement and I thought it was a very thoughtful policy agenda for India. Now, what is important is that you presented a budget for India at 100. Could you explain first to our viewers, why are you presenting a vision for the next 25 years while presenting this year's budget? Why do we need a vision for a quarter of a century?
I think this quarter of a century leading towards India at 100 years since 1947 are very critical, and we think several steps which have to be taken will have to be taken in these 25 years, keeping India at 100 in mind, because after all, if we are going to be a very strong, large economy, at least in the 75th year, if you don't ensure that our people get all the basic facilities about which a lot of political discourse has been happening since the last 40-45 years, removal of poverty, trying to make inclusive growth and so on. But it is to the credit of Prime Minister Modi that from 2014, aiming at good delivery, the last mile delivery, we've achieved quite a few things towards actually uplifting the lives of people, bringing in financial inclusion, ensuring everybody has a house, and also making sure that water and also basic amenities like toilets in the house, then giving women a bit more climate conscious, health conscious cooking medium, and so on. So with saturation nearly achieved in many of these, the basic amenities reaching every citizen of India is being ensured. But that's not just enough. We need to have really 21st century type infrastructure so that, let us say, small farmers from their villages are able to get their products to the market. There are better road connectivity, electricity to every village. Why? Even optical fibers reaching villages, so better internet connectivity comes, and there's no difference between the rural area and urban. All these need a lot of concerted action, good amount of money to be invested, and a thought about how India will be when it is 100 years. And that cannot be done when you're 99, 98, 97 years leading towards 2 or 1 year before independence. It needs a bit of medium-term planning, and that is why the 25 years plan.
Ms. Sitharaman, the markets responded well, industry responded well. The markets ended almost 850 points higher, the Nifty went up. It was seen to be a high-tech, futuristic budget. But obviously there must have been a deliberate intent to look at a new and more digitized India with digitization and the benefits of digitization catalyzing the next phase of India's growth. But your detractors use interesting phrases even to counter that. For example, they floated the narrative, and I quote, they say digital catchphrases cannot dissolve inequality. Digital models cannot dissolve inequality, almost as if they have presented your future-ready, digital-friendly vision as contrary to a more socialistic, equalizing nature, approach to the economy. Are these two approaches intrinsically any different? What is your response to this kind of criticism that some sections are coming up with?
I think they are keeping their view somewhat knowingly short-sighted, because on digitization you don't need to do extensive or in-depth research in paper, that is, because you will know, and every citizen of India can speak for it, during the pandemic there was an exponential increase in the way in which common Indian adapted and adopted technology, adapted to and adopted technologies. The payment system in India was so, actually the word viral has become so commonplace, but I'll still use it. Actual went viral in that literacy, levels of literacy, your residence, rural or urban, your profession, whether you're a white-collared office-going person or somebody who's working on the roadside selling their way. Everyone took to QR codes, digital payment system, Beam app, RuPay cards, and that itself speaks about how technology has got everyone into it, democratizing the whole process. And if you want to speak for socialism, what better instrument than the technology in taking it to all common citizens? It's not the privy of the rich to own technology today. As a user, I can have my phone doing everything for me, and that too not a smartphone, ordinary feature phone. So those who talk about technology is not going to help, in the sense that it's not going to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, the haves and have-nots, are actually reading it wrong. People have adapted technology very well, and that is one of the reasons why DBT is so successful. And because DBT is successful, we were able to reach out to those deserving of help and relief even during the pandemic, whilst many of the developed economies couldn't do it. India has got an inherent strength in technology usage, and this is what has got to be actually leveraged for taking India to the globe, saying we can lead in dealing with mass use of technology, which reduces the cost of transaction in an economy, and that's important for a common man.
That's true. Ms. Sitharaman, I now want to come to of course I want to spend some time understanding the long-term vision that's embedded in the budget, but let me come to the point that's pricking the Aam Aadmi, the middle class. And here we come to a basic question between two approaches: no further burden as opposed to some relief. You've been saying, and I quote, "I have not collected a single rupee additionally through the tax burden," which probably, certainly is true. But Ms. Sitharaman, the last 2 years, as you know, have been very, very grueling for the common citizen. Jobs lost, inflation, almost every family has had to battle with the economic repercussions of COVID. Why was there no direct relief for them?
direct relief is being provided in various different ways. Farmers are being provided, small farmers particularly, who you can really conveniently include into the middle class category. They are getting paid directly into their account, aren't they? Similarly, when we've extended without security credit facility for the MSMEs, isn't that directly helping them without extracting anything from them? Similarly, during the lockdown, when people could not pay interest on interest during a time when they were at home, locked down because of the pandemic, the interest on interest, the government has borne it because that's a requisite as per banking rules. Banks could not have foregone it. So we didn't want the burden on the middle class citizen, and that is why we paid the interest on interest, running to more than nearly almost 7,000 crores of rupees. Nearly. I'm not saying it is 7,000, it's probably somewhere close to it. Are these help being directly given to the middle class? Startups have had several fiscal relief given to them, registration relief given to them. MSMEs get a better definition through which they are able to obtain several facilities. They are not middle class citizens who are doing them. So yes, I understand the difficulty, but it's also not completely right to say government is not thinking about them or government is not doing anything to them.
Yeah, Ms. Sitharaman, again, if I may follow up to that, what about inflation? You know, CPI rose to a 5-month high of about 5.59% in the month of December. So again, you know, the argument goes that perhaps in the given situation, the inflation, the inflationary situation, perhaps is a, you know, is a reason for what I mean when I mean direct cuts. I mean direct tax relief.
Inflation is a question which the government is responding to in that, first of all, if I speak just on numbers, we've never breached a tolerance limit of about 6%. That doesn't mean, I mean, how does it translate to the common citizen? It may not really mean anything if I say we have not breached 6% more than 1 month at a time, whereas earlier regimes we crossed 10%. No, none of that. I understand petroleum and diesel prices, and I recall how just before Deepavali the Prime Minister himself said to the public, addressing through a public address, saying that I'm bringing the prices down. That's because we understand the brunt of fuel hike. But fuel hike is also a global phenomenon. Now we are paying some of the highest rates for the crude. One, and second, international commodity prices have also gone up. So many of our manufacturers who import goods, raw materials, are paying a higher price, and that's also a cause for inflation within India. But when it comes to essential goods, whether it is edible oils or pulses, periodically the group of ministers, which is an informal group of ministers, decides and ensures by bringing imports to make sure the gap in our supply chain. India has always had a problem in terms of pulses being more, in the sense of we consume more pulses than what we produce. So we have MOUs signed with many governments. We import pulses from Canada, from Mozambique, from Myanmar, and so on. So perishable commodities like onions and fruits and vegetables are also cyclically affected because of the gaps between one harvest and the other. So they are managed by the government. Yes, more can be done. We will do more, and we are responding to it.
What do you make of Chidambaram's one-liner when he did a press conference and he said, "This is the most capitalist budget that I have ever read"?
I was amused by that comment because it comes from a party which till today, till probably this minute, claims credit for opening Indian economy. And also, periodically when people remind me about being a finance minister who can come up with dynamic solutions, we've been quoted 1997 budget. So the author of the budget 1997 tells me that I'm doing a full complement, capitalist kind of a budget. I wonder whether it's a grudging certification which is being given, because what they couldn't achieve after opening the economy and in 91 and what even after 97, it was only Atal Bihari Vajpayee who could carry forward some of the reforms. And again after that, 10 years hiatus followed. Even though Congress was in power, they couldn't do a thing. And in 2014, it was Prime Minister Modi who picked up on GST, IBC, and very many other reforms, as a result of which today we are able to come up with a budget which speaks clearly about what government should do, and that is maximum of governance and minimum of government. And that's what this budget reflects. And if that is called capitalist, why not?
Ms. Sitharaman, I've been thinking about it, and it's quite evident to some of us who've seen successive governments over the years that there appears to be a fundamental difference between the way the Modi government approaches a budget, not just a budget, approaches economic and financial decision making as opposed to previous governments. And would I be wrong in saying, my own personal assessment is that the Modi government, particularly the Modi government, and in fact, if I may say, as is evident in the 4 budgets that you presented, that the union budget is no longer a political statement or a political opportunity. And therefore, perhaps because you have to some extent delinked your politics from your economics, that your approach is more strategic, less tactical in a political sense. I mean, that you are not looking at fundamentally 3 or 4 measures in a budget which will be vote-catching measures. And this was very evident for me particularly, because this budget is just on the anvil of the Uttar Pradesh election, and yet we found nothing in the budget which can be seen to be directly linked into gaining anything politically in the UP elections. So do you also believe that to some extent in recent years the budget is no longer being seen to be a political exercise, which is the way it was always looked at, when people used to say good economics is bad politics and bad politics is good economics?
See, when you have a Prime Minister whose governance hallmark is delivery, and the last mile delivery in particular, and repeatedly he's proven that when it comes to reaching out to the most remotely located villages, or to those who being close to state capital also being denied of basic facilities, electricity, not even poles for carrying the electricity wires, cables were laid in some of the small towns which are close to the, let's say, the headquarters of very many states. Electricity generation, gas being distributed, all these repeatedly proved that Prime Minister Modi really successfully executes, as much as he plans, executes the last mile delivery. The promises actually showed that people were recognizing, yes, I've received the benefit, and they were not, as was once heard during the UPA regime, Prime Minister saying the first charge on my budget and on the resources of the country will be to a particular community rather than for all those who deserve to get it. So going by the principle of Sabka Saath, every citizen who was eligible to get the benefit, irrespective of his caste, class or religion, got it. And in that there was just no differentiation. As a result, you find all over the country people say that yes, I've benefited from the schemes of Prime Minister Modi. Now, if that is the way you're reaching out to people, it's very clear that you may announce and you may do the execution of a plan or a scheme all through the year. So what is it that you have to do specifically during an election? You have not only announced but executed, and we'll continue to do that because we want to transform this country into a new India, and the Prime Minister actually himself spends hours in reviewing every such project.
I agree. Let me take that further. I think there is a fundamental difference in the way you've been approaching macroeconomic policy, and it shows in certain decisions of the government. For example, Ms. Sitharaman, you announced how PLI schemes, productivity-linked incentive schemes, could generate 6 million new jobs and an additional production of 30 lakh crores in the next 5 years. Now, but the opposition is not listening to you on that. Or rather, would I say they don't want to listen to you on that. They are harping on the fact that despite an increase in MGNREGA takers, there is a 25% cut made to the MGNREGA budget. And, I'd like you to elaborate on this. Tell me if I'm correct, that you are looking at creating more gainful employment, gainful for economic growth, development and infrastructure, rather than employment for employment's sake. And therefore, perhaps in your mind, your approach, you're not anti-subsidy, but you are more for the creation of jobs that are linked to productivity and national targets, rather than employment for employment's sake. But can you please explain this? Is this why, am I reading it correctly, is this why there's an increase in PLI, but there are cuts in MGNREGA?
First of all, Arnab, there are no cuts in MGNREGA. MGNREGA is a demand-driven program. Last year, we had given a certain amount at the BE stage. When the budget gets announced, there's a budgetary estimate done and a certain amount is given for, let's say, MGNREGA. As we go along, if there are demand much more than what we've expected, we go to the Parliament during the supplementary demand for grants, which supplementary demand for grants itself can be done 2 times or even a 3rd time, or as close to the end of the year. So through the supplementary demand, we bring in more resources as the demand grows up. That's what happened in 2020, where in the BE stage I had given only about 64,000 or something. But once the corona lockdown and the migration all started, we had pooled all our resources other than giving more money to MGNREGA itself, and crossed 1,11,000 crores for MGNREGA, just MGNREGA. If that happened in 2020, in the year ending March 21, in the February budget of 21-22, I had again given money, and that expanded in the RE stage. I had brought in a bit more because the demand came in. So at any point in time, first of all, please compare what was said during the BE and again what is being said during the BE itself. As we go along the year, when we add up and make that amount much more, and the revised estimate we give a different amount, going by that, comparing the next year's BE would not be correct. So if 68,000 crores went to 1,11,000, the next year I start with 68,000, it's wrong to say I've cut down from 1,11,000 because BE I gave 68, BE again I'm giving 68 or 70, but I'm willing to go along as and when the demand goes up. That's how I would suggest you look at the way the budget is treating such programs which are anyway demand driven. There's no apportioning of money at the BE stage itself. Yes, we give some and then we keep building on it.
Ms. Sitharaman, you are also a very senior politician. You have been national spokesperson of your party for a very, very long time. and hence nobody knows more than you about political messaging. I agree with you in what you have said, and I'm sure most of the Republic Network viewers will agree with you. And I think the Finance Minister, personally, viewers, is being very straight when she says, I will respond to demand as and when it comes. But my question to you, Finance Minister, is that what about messaging? As a politician, does it not concern you that your messaging may be misinterpreted? For example, let me give you two case studies. Tribal rights groups are saying, I'm not saying they are correct. Some tribal advocacy group has been quoted as saying there will be budgetary cuts on food subsidy and MGNREGA. 20% they say of MGNREGA workers are tribals, and tribal communities will bear the brunt. Now this may not be right, but it is messaging which can be construed politically. Following up very quickly from that, Sitharaman says the budget is anti-people, and he quotes, when human suffering exponentially grew in the last 2 years, subsidies on food, fertilizer and petroleum was slashed. Now, do you feel the need to counter this narrative with more political messaging? Because I feel that you're quite clear about what you're doing, but the government is not going out of its way to correct any political messaging. Why so? Whether it's right or wrong, why so?
No, political messaging is very important. I agree with you. And we have to repeatedly, untiringly work on the messaging. I agree with you on that as well. But you also would know that, in fact, before I comment on one thing, it might help us to see how in India lots of things change very well, but some things change to remain the same. I was looking at a R.K. Lakshman cartoon of 1989, I think 85 to 89, some period, where after the budget, in the presence of the common man, the then opposition, some leader says, no, this budget has not done anything for farmers, for the poor, nor does it have anything for the middle class. It's floating around now, everybody's sort of reveling in R.K. Lakshman's cartoon. They were actually timeless, they are timeless cartoons. That actually is true even today. People say the very same words. You have not done anything for poor, you have not done anything for farmer, you have not done anything for the middle class. Whereas I am giving you list of things that we have done. And I understand the opposition is unable to pick on tangible big issues. I'm not saying there are no issues. Pandemic affected economy has still a lot of work to be done, still a lot of help to be reached, and still a lot of measures which are necessary for us to sustain so that economy can grow in a very steady and sustained fashion. So, but even with all this said, we'll repeat the same line. After a point, it is like you can convince a person who wants to listen and think, but if I've already made up my mind, no argument can convince them. But that doesn't mean that I give up on communication. You're right, we'll have to go on explaining our position.
You're correct. And at the same time, if I may politely disagree with you to some extent, not completely, but in the sense that I do not think there has been any finance minister since independence who has faced the triple whammy of economic volatility and tough times in the way that you have, because COVID is an event at completely another scale. I do not think in post-independence India there has been any finance minister who has handled unforeseen events one after the other. And viewers, I just want to put this in perspective. If you look at the last 2.5 years, I'm sorry I'm taking a little detour from this interview of 30 seconds, viewers, Ms. Sitharaman. If you look at the last 2.5 years of Nirmala Sitharaman's tenure particularly, you would realize that from the end of 2019 onwards, even before COVID hit, the NPA crisis, all of which were events which were inherited by her, not created by her. That was 6 months before COVID. COVID comes in March 2021, and we are now at a 2-year cycle. So she's really been through a 2-year cycle in which I think every month, Ms. Sitharaman, I think every month there was somebody who was writing you off and blaming you, and conjecturing on where this would go. Before I proceed to the next specific question, would you probably care for a comment on that? That the last 2.5 years, personally, what has it been steering the ship personally for you and at the Finance Ministry? Because these are unprecedented times by any standards.
I agree, yes, these are unprecedented times and the challenges have been not possible for me to document in its intensity. But what kept me going, or what kept all of us going, 2-3 things. You could see suffering everywhere, but the immense stamina and also the determination with which the Indian citizen, each one of us have had somebody in our families or in our neighborhood or among our friends affected by this. But even despite all that, the way in which each one of us have kept our feet in the ground and made sure that we will fight to get over this. So the Indian citizens give me motivation. I am blessed with the Prime Minister who actually works 24/7 and has been accessible to all of us during the pandemic, even now and as always. Even today, any time we need his guidance, he is available, doesn't ever show that the stress is on him, and that kind of a clear-headed guidance is something which I am very fortunate, and if I may say that the country is fortunate that we have a Prime Minister who is so dedicated and committed, and therefore we can be sure that we are being led carefully through the challenges. Led carefully through the challenges so that we can come out of it safely. So that is the second, I would think. The third is, I think what is available for us, and the teams have worked, people have given a lot of inputs, the toing and froing on consultation has thrown up a lot of workable ideas, and all of that put together gave me the feeling that I've not been kept wondering what to do next. These ideas which came in, these ideas on which the ministries worked, have always given us enough substance to say, right, we can do something, and went about doing it without thinking that this will yield this result or that. It was a business to serve, we kept serving. So I am actually in a way grateful that I'm here to be of use, some help, and I shall keep doing it.
Well, you've done an incredible job, and I agree with you about the strategic direction that the Prime Minister has given. Now, coming back to a few specific questions, disinvestment, your critics say that this is a failed endeavor. Is that true? There is some amount of criticism coming in here. Specifically, how is the government going to meet its disinvestment targets when the budget has seen a third straight increase in the targets at 65,000 crores, which came down from the divestment target of FY 21-22 of 78,000 crores from 1.75 lakh crores. Your critics say divestment is a failed endeavor. What is your take on that? And are you deliberately keeping your targets very, very conservative, hoping to overachieve on them?
No, we have actually kept our targets realistic. This year the target is absolutely realistic. Disinvestment is not a failed endeavor. It is a fairly complex endeavor. It requires so many of us to have to work together so that the process is transparent, the process complies with existing rules, we don't violate, we don't overlook any of the due diligences which have to be followed, and making sure that we go out there for the disinvestment only after doing a complete exercise. It does consume a lot of time, I admit, and we are trying to be sure that we can be speedier without foregoing compliance at any stage, at any level. And therefore, I think I want to say, and therefore, we are going on that route because it's a commitment given in the last budget, which we've reinforced and reiterated even this time. So we will go on that path. We will continue with the disinvestment, and this time's target will be achieved.
How much are you pegging on LIC's disinvestment? There were reports saying that the government is seeking a valuation of over 200 crores, which means a 5% stake would be 78 or above 75,000 crores. So my question would be, are you pegging your entire hopes on disinvestment to that of LIC? Would it be fair to say that you're pegging a lot on LIC? And following up from that, a quick question, not to be pessimistic, Ms. Sitharaman, what if things go wrong, like they did when HAL hit the market and LIC had to come to the rescue by subscribing 70% of HAL's 4,200 crore initial public offering? So, are you pegging a lot on LIC, and is there a risk associated with it?
Well, in the next few days, we should be able to, next few days or within a week, we should be able to come with the details of how much is getting through for the IPO. As regards valuation, I think announcements will be made. We are not undervaluing it or overvaluing it. I would like to believe we are trying to reach and strike an optimum number. Well, there were days, as you referred to, when one public sector unit would take off some shares in some other public sector enterprise and call it disinvestment. But I don't think we are going that route. We mean disinvestment, then it is truly being, the investments are being truly made available to all retail and institutional outside of the government buyers.
Big talking point here on our channel has been on digital virtual assets, or what is being termed as the crypto tax. First question is, you put in this 30% tax rate on digital virtual assets in your speech. What did you mean by digital virtual assets? Does it include both NFTs and cryptocurrency?
I don't see any currency outside of the domain of the sovereign. And therefore, anything that develops digitally outside, I refrain from calling them currencies. Currency is the domain of the government or the authorized central bank, the Reserve Bank of India. So that's one thing I do not want to expand on the understanding. That's where the currency rests. But taxing operations of any kind of product for a profit will be taxed, and that's what we have come out with. Transactions emerging out of the digital operations in whatever form, assets of some kind which are being bought and sold, there is a tax which is levied. And in order to have those who are transacting there also be sure that they are in a way coming on board, we've put a TDS on them, which is again and not an additional tax. It can be reconciled with the rest of their tax portfolio. So that's where we are.
But are you with the tax structure implicitly legitimizing crypto? Because there was another issue on it. There was the other aspect of it, of of the misuse of crypto, etc. Is the taxation an implicit legitimization of crypto in a way, you think, Ms. Sitharaman?
Well, no, I have not broached the question of legitimacy yet of the digital activities which are going on. Regulation or complete ban or anything are things on which decision will be taken only after the consultation process is over. At this stage, we are only taxing the operations.
So this is an interim measure in a way. Those who are saying this means that cryptos got a seal of approval from the government are reading it wrong.
Well, I'm not even commenting on how they are reading it. I'm waiting for the consultation to be over, post which whatever the government's decision would be will be announced. So not till then can I comment on it. The process of consultation is ongoing, so it wouldn't be fair for me to comment. And also, the budgetary proposal for a central bank digital currency has already been placed in the House. The House is in session. So beyond this, it won't be right for me to speak on the matter.
Okay. Ms. Sitharaman, last question. I do appreciate that many of these issues will come up in the course of the discussion and debate on the finance bill. Last point. Can you give your view from North Block on what you see as India's economic outlook for the next 1 year? The economic survey has given a very conservative growth estimate of 8 to 8.5%. But are we fully on the growth of recovery when there are people like Raghuram Rajan who caution about a K-shaped recovery, and Arvind Subramaniam in fact claims that the economy has been in the ICU. So these are all these doomsday predictions. I'd like you to end with your response to the doomsday scenario holders, and also your overall sense to all the viewers of what you think the Indian economy will be placed at over the next 1 year and maybe this time next year.
Well, I will certainly say that the economy is reviving. Sustained revival is what is being noticed. And not just me, not just Government of India, not just our economic survey, although their number and my number may differ. All of us are speaking about a very fast growing economy. Now, not just us, globally too, whichever institution you may take, credit rating agency, multilateral funding agencies, all of them are saying India will be the fastest growing economy from among the large economies. And if that is being said by others removed from the government, it corroborates with the number that we are talking about. And therefore, I would think for everyone, you know, those who say aye and those who say no, I think the truth is across the board very similar to what Government of India is saying. We will be the fastest growing economy. Sustained recovery is happening and it will continue to happen is my hope. Data indicates that, and above all, I think what is important is, from my side, I still have to give a helping hand for a few more sectors, and that is why hospitality and related sectors have been given an extended ECGLS, which is specifically for them at another 50,000 crores of sovereign guarantees announced, subject to Parliament passing it. So we shall be continuously monitoring the economy, taking feedback, taking inputs, and be ready also to be responsive as and when there is need. But it is a fast growing economy. If all of us put our, as Prime Minister says, sabka prayas, it can be a sustained, fairly long term above 8 to 9% growth. That is, of course, if we don't sort of pull ourselves down and constantly be cynical that we may not be able to do it, we may not be able to do it. No, we can do it, we shall do it, and we are extending everything possible from our side to make the economy grow at that level, because it is the strong belief of the Prime Minister. It is through economic development, it is through sustained growth that India can see a transformational change. There is no more sloganeering, it is all action.
No doubt about that. And viewers, it is this calm and unflappable demeanor of Ms. Sitharaman that I must say, Ms. Sitharaman, you have taken the economy against all odds and in the most strenuous and challenging of circumstances. And you have done that with remarkable discipline over the economy. And I must congratulate you and everyone in the Finance Ministry for the way you've steered the economy and for this year's budget. Ms. Sitharaman, it's a pleasure talking to you. I thank you very much for joining me on this episode of The Nation Wants to Know. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnab.